Hello everyone. My name is Yana. Hello everyone. My name is Yana and I am a Google Ads specialist. I work on delivering targeted audiences to businesses with the required parameters and scaling sales. For businesses in different countries around the world using those same AI-powered Google Ads tools. And in today's video, I'm going to show you a case study from my team. By the way, I'll even show you the before and after period so you can get a more or less realistic picture. I even have incoming calls here and purchases separately so that, well, everything is described more clearly and appropriately. With this case, I want to show that not everything happens just by chance or because of seasonality. There are actually reasonable, systematic actions you can take in an account. Dig into the details and scale up results in advertising accounts. So, if we take a look, right now I've selected a very large time frame for you, starting from January, because here, well, let's put it this way. What is this niche? I'll call it something generic so I don't reveal the client or their niche, because, for example, I can sometimes figure out who it is just from the case details, especially if competitors are watching. Let's say, for example, it's B2B products, for some kind of celebration, just as a placeholder. So, here's what we have, roughly speaking. We all know, of course, that February has Valentine's Day on the 14th, and then there's March 8th, but I'm not including March here yet because this is monthly analytics, and March isn't fully updated yet. The smallest time frame I have for analytics here is by month, so you can see an objective picture, whether it's the result of the team's work or not, taking into account the high and low seasons. I've also marked the project start date for you. We took on the project around December 20th, plus a few days for setup, translations, proper conversions, and so on. Somewhere around the 25th or 26th, that's when we got our first clicks. So we didn't even launch during the best period, not in the peak season or right before any big sales. We actually launched right after the main holidays. Maybe some people were still buying a few things before New Year's, but just so you understand, it wasn't like the very beginning of December. So what cool results can I show and demonstrate to you? Well, the fact is that phone calls themselves, in the B2B world, phone calls also play a big role. For now, we're optimizing for them. We need to reach a certain number, a combination of goals for this thing, so that we can then, for example, switch to tracking actual purchases. But considering the delivery formats, like Nova Poshta and others, for now we're putting this off. Anyway, these are technical details that don't affect you. Here we have the month of January. You can see that these phone call leads, that's our call tracking setup. Incoming calls are 59 to 62. And here we had 352 purchases. For comparison, January 2024, we had 20 call leads and 192 purchases. So, it's hard not to notice the difference. 352 purchases versus 192. And of course, February. Maybe I won't show some super impressive growth here. But considering that we've just started, our goal is to scale up, to become leaders. Well, leaders in this niche, so to speak. But we need to do it carefully, not just rush in head first. Because when you have the goal of becoming a leader in a certain niche, you need to gradually increase the auction value so you don't end up in a trap that leaders can create for themselves when they overheat the auction and just drive up the cost per click bids in the auction. And as a result, Google, over a quarter or even 4 months, can set a new, higher threshold bid. What is a threshold bid? It's the minimum bid, not for the auction overall, but specifically for that niche, in order to get your ads shown. You can Google what a threshold bid is. Look it up in Google's help documentation. There's a description there, unless they've rewritten it, of course. So, what do we see here? February is the season when, basically, you can get by just because it's the season, without taking any other criteria into account. By the way, I think we could have done even more during the season if the client had tried to top up the account more regularly. Yes, I understand that we receive some of the analytics with a delay, And it seems like the cost per conversion is much higher, but at those moments when we actually needed to push harder, so to speak, we were a bit short on balance. But let's just compare what we have, roughly speaking. We have, well, 61 phone calls and 580 purchases and 80. Previously, Google Analytics 4 was used here, which I don't really like when it comes to scaling or lowering the cost per conversion. Plus, you have to understand that these decimals, these fractions, are actually hidden in the ad account, and it's very hard to calculate the real number of conversions. So, if we want to scale the account, we need to work with some concrete numbers. And these numbers don't always lead to any kind of positive feedback. So, we have 588. In February 2025, we have 648 and 167 phone call leads. Even if we're not focusing on calls, 648 and 580 might not seem like a lot, but if we analyze by day and look at the IDs, for example, the actual number of conversions, and I would like to show them to you, then the number of full, valid conversions could be much lower. Remember that this data-driven attribution model does not show the probability of a conversion happening. So, for example, if you see 0.3 conversions, 0.5, 0.8, 0.75, or 0.05, that doesn't mean it's still collecting analytics and will eventually show a full conversion. No. It shows you the percentage impact. Anastasia Hlashchenko, in this path to conversion itself, of this particular click on this product. So basically, it shows how valuable that specific click was in making the conversion happen. Most likely, those 100% or those 20%, for example, if we see 0.8 attributed to some other source or channel, it might look like Google claimed them for itself, but that's not the case. So in reality, the actual number here is much lower. So let's put it this way, these are the numbers we can actually work with when scaling. Here, we have a nice, round, total of 648. It might not seem like a huge amount, but overall, the growth rate is decent, especially considering that the client hasn't been topping up the balance very actively. Plus, he still has his own set of ad campaigns. Like here, he has discovery, and there was some display campaign that we don't really support, and that one is also eating into the daily ad budget. It actually eats up quite a significant chunk. Of course, it also brings in some return on investment, but we don't support it. However, that's the reason why, for example, I think we could have done even more in this case, even more. Anastasia Hlashchenko, well, and the increase in the number of phone call leads is primarily due to the fact that we started to focus more specifically on, so to speak, targeting certain areas, not just going after everything in general, but narrowing down our segmentation so we don't give away our tricks. And this allowed us to attract more clients to our website, clients who usually, in this way, would buy all of this from other advertisers or from offline businesses. So I think this is a kind of interim assessment that really shows advertising campaigns work in a completely different way now. A slightly different customer avatar, a completely different customer context. Well, of course, if I take, for example, a slightly shorter period, I don't know, maybe from July to this February, for instance. Well, here, you can immediately see, for example, the period when we started and then the steady growth in calls, it's much more visually noticeable. That's why I showed you the period starting from January, so you could see similar periods for comparison, because in reality, we've been working since the end of December, January, right, and we've already worked through February. Anastasia Hlashchenko, and December is still ongoing for us as well. I'm not going to show March yet, because March is still, let's say, just a snapshot of the full month. And right now, I'm only recording the very beginning of the month, so to speak. So, what exactly makes all of this possible in principle? I'll be honest, the reason is that there can be several hundred or even thousands of variations of the same product. Because this is B2B, there are different formats, different sizes, and so on. Of course, this really complicates the process of optimizing advertising campaigns because uh, you can kind of compare this, for example, to a piece of clothing or, say, to different volume formats of a certain product. Right? Most likely, it's easier to compare it to clothing. For example, let's say we're selling some pants, and we have a size chart ranging from children's sizes all the way up to super large sizes. Of course, when you run ads for them, some sizes immediately start converting, while others don't. Some customers like one product photo, others prefer a different one, meaning the visual presentation and other details matter. Anastasia Hlushchenko, of course, this adds complexity to promoting this B2B story. And in general, the main challenge of all these niches is actually not so much a difficulty as it is a convenience, and maybe even something that's more convenient than inconvenient, in the sense that everyone tries to go all in and make a big splash right away. But when you go into a pretty narrow segmentation, that's something that, for example, in other niches, if you've seen my case studies, like with home goods, that approach just doesn't work. There, a slightly more generalized approach works better. You can try to segment it the same way as in this advertising format, but most likely, the feedback there will come with a much bigger delay than, for example, in this project. Here, the segmentation by format structure is narrower and more detailed, because in this structure it's harder to select a product that can actually convert. So, do you understand why I'm emphasizing the importance of the products? Because it might seem like you can just open up the report editor and try, for example, well, how can I put this? You can single out the product IDs that are super high performing, for example, the ones that sell really well. But these high performers, for example, right, it could just be that, historically, they happen to be shown regularly, and that's why they have those conversions. And there's also a large group of even variants of these high performers that were never shown at all. But in fact, it's the same product, just, for example, in different sizes, or maybe just different formats of the same product, right? So, it's about the variability of these products. And you need to check that. Often, it happens that even among the formats or variants of this product, there are still some hidden high performers you can bet on, use to scale the account and basically grow. There will be some products, for example, that will get more incoming calls, like call tracking, for instance. And there will be some that, for example, will immediately go straight to purchase. This will also be present, and here the task is to try to run a series of these tests by cycling through this set of products. Previously, basically, the scaling format here was done by duplicating feeds. So there's a main feed for a certain number of products, and this same feed was duplicated, for example, conditionally. So the IDs are technically different, but the automation pretty much understands everything correctly when it sees that the product URL is the same, that the behavior is the same, you know. The AI already gets all of this anyway. It's already used to people adding formats, options, and that there can be different IDs. So it's not as picky now, unlike the old smart shopping. It doesn't treat these product IDs so strictly or rigidly, like, here's the product that will definitely convert for us, and we're only going in that direction. No, now the system treats all your duplicate feeds more like different variations of the same product. So it's not. At the same time, it kind of does you a disservice, because in reality, you're basically duplicating, let's say, your set of conversions in some way. But as practice has shown, since January and February, these duplicates don't really play that big of a role, except maybe in very rapid scaling. Why? Because in reality, all your new AIs, whether they're for duplicates or not, when launched, will use the account's analytics. Because they don't have their own personal analytics yet, they can't refer to themselves and will use your account's analytics. And in the account, they'll see which URL and what product format you have. If you, of course, are passing on proper dynamic remarketing, well set up, with Google Business Vertical, with IDs, with value, then it will refer to that information. It will see that this product was running for you, and it will simply try to push almost the exact same product in the duplicate feed. Yes, there might be some minor differences, but usually that's how it works. On one hand, you get scaling of the same set of products, but this same set of products might make up, let's say, just a few percent, maybe up to 10%. It was very rare that I saw, for example, around 30%. Well, that's only if the product assortment is really small, literally up to 50 items, then maybe the percentage would be higher, right? Overall, if we're talking about a diverse product assortment with thousands of items, varying in price, format, and options, usually it's at most about 10% of the products that actually drive those conversions. All the other products, sometimes get shown, sometimes get clicked on, and occasionally convert, but it doesn't turn into a consistent pattern. And of course, this is a problem for these B2B projects, which needs to be addressed separately and taught to the PIM systems. So the main problem, almost in every niche, is usually to form a core of several diverse sets of products that could compensate for the drop in certain other top categories. Usually, this is quite difficult because our niche is more or less the same. It's a bit easier to do this than, for example, if we were selling some types of industrial equipment, like air filters or water filters. They're still a bit different in format. Ours isn't like that. Everything we have is for celebrations. Our niche is more straightforward, and the customer avatar is more or less clear. So I'm describing this to you as a level of complexity. So, can you make duplicate feeds? Of course you can, but you need to consider whether your entire product assortment has been tested and whether everything is being shown. Do you really understand which of your products are the top sellers? Do you realize that you might have promoted a certain product assortment, but, for example, it's very expensive? It falls into the dead weight category, meaning it spends money and has a very high cost per conversion. Or, for example, maybe it's in the category of products that haven't sold at all, items that haven't been promoted enough or haven't generated enough demand. And accordingly, maybe, within those, say, 80 or even 60% of products that are just kind of hanging around at the tail end because of the way the AI is analyzing things, it could turn out that there are actually even more top-selling products or top categories hidden in there. To understand this, you just need to test it. Sometimes a business comes in already knowing which products are selling really well and which ones aren't. Other times, they don't know this because only a certain set of products has always been selling. So, in any case, you still need to test and find out. We're not working in a Google Ads simulator, right? We're working in the real market with real competitors. Isn't that right? Because no one is protected from the possibility that tomorrow someone new might enter the market and, for example, be very aggressive in certain auctions. No one is protected from possible changes in the Max algorithm itself. For example, I wrote about this in my Telegram channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe. My team told me that from February 17th to 19th, 2025, there was some kind of obvious glitch, or maybe new algorithms, when the performance of Google's own tags dropped significantly. Although the people at Google say that everything is fine, that these are just planned changes. We'll see whether these changes are for better or worse. For now, we can only evaluate them after the fact. There are accounts where this period turned out to be extremely expensive, and then all the PIMAXs recovered on their own. Those who come in for a consultation, literally just yesterday, we were going over this with a client who said, something is just not right. Yeah, there was that period when something was off, but then all his PIMAXs started recovering and getting back to about the same performance levels as before. So there are a ton of different nuances, right? Competitors can change, the client. Yeah, things can change for the client too, because in fact, we're dealing with traffic here. So, for example, our team's job is to teach the AI to select the right users who are just about ready to place an order. How can we figure that out? How does this system understand it? No matter how much we complain about our uniqueness and individuality, on the internet, we're all the same. And for this big AI robot, Well, robot, or rather, this intellectually advanced, evolving robot, it's not that hard to average us out and see how each of us makes decisions. Of course, the more statistics there are over a certain period of time, and for now, AI thinks in 30-day cycles. The more analytics it has, the more accurately it can target your client avatar. Of course, there can still be some variations. Did we delete all the duplicate feeds? No, we adapted them to our needs based on tests with different bid formats, narrow segmentation, and product selection. Sometimes that's actually quite effective, meaning you can adapt to anything. Because if we had completely removed the AI related, oh my, all those duplicate feeds for the AI, we would have basically broken everything that had been built up until then. Our task, essentially, is to strengthen certain aspects and push it forward because, well, breaking things is easy, but building, as they say in that philosophical, ethical, and worldview kind of saying, right, it's easier to bring someone down than to lift them up. It's much harder to help someone climb up a hill than to pull them down and lower them. Well, it's the same story here. Breaking down everything that's been built up, we tried to gather the right analytics and focus it in the right direction. And of course, the result here is clear and obvious. So basically, you could say that, at least, in my opinion, the result is pretty cool. Could we have done more here? Honestly, I think we could have done more. But as you can see right now, there's even a message saying balance is running low. Objectively, we almost always have the same problem with this account, not topping up the account quickly enough. I hope that we'll be able to improve on this a bit. Because, honestly, it's pretty hard to predict exactly how much more we'll need to spend, right? We can try to base it, for example, on last year's numbers, right? But we're already surpassing those here. There are situations when our balance is almost at zero, we're dropping really hard, and then we have to recover and build it back up, of course. So, yeah, that's one of those challenges that usually comes up in accounts. Will something bad happen? Will it drastically change or break the PIM axis? If the client doesn't top up the ad account? No. All of them are already ramped up on our end. The traffic spikes are going pretty well. The only thing is, if he doesn't top up the account, there won't be any traffic and, obviously, there won't be any conversions. You could basically call it lost profit, right? Rather than saying it somehow seriously broke the PIM axis. We always try to build a structure that's more stable rather than something more volatile. Like when you set up a really complex system of leverage campaigns, where making changes can actually drastically alter the direction of the ad campaigns themselves. Here's a case like that as an example. I wanted to show it to you. We're still in the process. I think, in a month or two, I'll record a follow-up to this case. I would still like this time gap, so that I could show you year over year. March to March. So you can see it like that. By March, I really want to show you much better results here. This period, so that we're actually higher than these intervals that are here, that are present here. I think we can do it. We'll manage. We'll keep working on it. That's all from me for now.